And so let's just get started here. So really, just for those who may be less familiar with the work that I've been doing, I have been broadcasting throughout the solar system using my radio station and homemade antenna array now for over 4.5 years. And primarily, when I started doing this, I was broadcasting on frequency 144.1 megahertz. And we went through this in past updates. And of course, I've been continuing doing that. And maybe 3.5 years ago, I discovered that, and we see it at the bottom of that slide here. I was drawn or inspired to multiply this frequency by the speed of light, right, in kilometer per second in the metric unit. And when I did that 3.5 years ago, I was stunned to see that the result of that calculation was giving exactly 43,200.0. I mean, to the dot. And at the time, I knew, what are the statistical probability of that being just an accident was infinitely small, obviously. And so I knew there was something there that I needed to dig into. And, upon looking on the internet, and we showed that again in the last update, that number, this 43,200, is the scaling factor of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And obviously this famous harmonic 432, which is all over the place in nature and especially in the pyramid, is very significant. And so that's why about maybe a year and a half ago, I built 2 additional antennas that will resonate with 432 megahertz and set up essentially or expanded my radio station so I could cover these 2 bands, if you will, this 144 and 432 megahertz with high power. And so this is the setup that I have here in Arizona right now. The 2 antennas on the extremities, or the 144 to cover the 144 megahertz, and this I can deploy about 150,000 watt of this setup, and the setup for 432 megahertz, which is rather new, as I said, it's relatively new. This one I can deploy about 250,000 watts. So at this power, obviously, the radio waves will physically reach every corner of our solar system and go far beyond. Now, so let me branch into this golden ratio triangular craft here. I had mentioned in the last update that this craft had manifested already 3 times, and there was something very unique about this graph, right? Is that the sides, by doing a model of this, and these are all the screenshots of the manifestations. So by dividing essentially any side of this triangular craft by any other side, and we see here, for instance, just to make it concrete, if we take the side C, this is a relative measurement that I made here. Right, by dividing the side C, for instance, by side B, this is expressed here. I was, getting the golden ratio. And this was first noticed actually by my friend David Sarita when we had the initial sighting several months ago. But this graph came back several times since, and I realized that when I was, again, dividing any side of this triangle by any other side, let's say even, for instance, side B divided by side A here, what we see also gives the golden ratio. And incredibly, dividing this long segment, the slide C, by the smallest one, the slide A, we're getting the golden ratio squared. So this was very astonishing to me, and I knew this was not an accident, right? The odds of that being just a coincidence or just infinitely small. And so there was something behind this very profound. And so
can I just interject for 1 second now?
Sure.
I know it's a little bit of a catch up, and I don't know if you're going to play a video clip, which I have seen videos that you take while you do this. Now that craft that you're talking about, I love this craft. When it appeared, And you see it take this shape, like it kind of moves in the sky or it blinks into this. And that's how you can kind of see that it is this object that it almost like, it looks like it's one shape and then it might even go flat. How, you know,
yeah,
I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, the positioning, well, the positioning itself is interesting because, you know, for this craft or this shape to appear in a golden ratio proportion, it has to be in the proper angle from my perspective, right? Because the craft could be from behind and I could see, I mean, there are many ways that this craft will not display this golden ratio proportion, if you will. It's not what happens. So this craft is kind of purposely posing and just, you know, appearing, materializing in and out of our dimension very rapidly in the proper angle. And briefly, just, you know, we're talking about the golden ratio. Why is it important? I mean, the golden ratio is one of the key driving force in our universe, one of the key driving principle, right? From the counter rotating field of the pine cone to the Nautilus shell to how hurricanes are evolving in terms of the dynamics, to galaxies, you know, how galaxies are essentially forming a hurricane and so on, even in the proportion of our body, our DNA and cells, and I have a few slides a bit later, the golden ratio is a key driving force, a key driving principle. And it's obviously highly mathematical. There's a lot of mathematics behind it. I will not go through it too much in detail here, but it is a very important you know, it's a very important principle, and it's obviously also all over in the pyramid and so on. So golden ratio is a key. So this is again here another expression of this graph. This sightings was this sighting, what the days of this one we had, this one was on December 5th. This was the first sighting actually, and we see here again the same proportion. And, you know, by doing this little math here, dividing any side of this triangle by another side, we consistently get the golden ratio or golden ratio squared. So I have a short video I'd like to show. Essentially, this is, so what I did after the third manifestation, I created an invitation message for this craft to manifest. And also in that message, I included the golden ratio proportions that they were communicating to me. So in a sense, you know, I was kind of sending back my homework to them, if you will, to tell them, hey, I figured it out, you know, just send me more, right? Yeah. So that's a bit the type of relationship that's been ongoing for, you know, for a while now. So, so yeah, so if you don't mind, let me just play the short clip here and we'll show, you know, the transmission and what unfolded next. So let me just open this up.
Get ready to go. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. And if you don't hear the sound, let me know at the beginning, but the sound should play well. So here we go. All right.
Wow.
So let's
That
go
is
back.
impressive.
Yeah, this was a shock to me too, in the sense that, you know, I was, you know, we always hope but don't expect, you know, I tried always to keep my expectation low. So yeah, so let me bring up the slide again here. All right.
One question for you. You mentioned there was a homemade antenna. How long did it take you to make this antenna?
It's a thing that I do over time. It's you know, the building the antenna itself, when I have all the ingredients, all the material, takes, you know, a couple of days.
Yeah.
It's just to assemble. I take my time to take assemble, make calculations, and, you know, I have a software, a specialized software to model these antennas, so they, you know, they have to be very precise and made in a very precise way, and so on. And so yeah, but then once I have all the ingredients, the materials, couple of these, lovely. Okay, so there's been so related to this craft and this golden ratio triangular craft. So there's been a major development. I'll say what was 5 days ago, and again I was in touch with friends Gary Osborne on this. So let me show you here. So I had noticed that there was more than the golden ratio proportions to this triangle, and so I ended up going online and finding a good program, an application to create triangles, right? To model a specialized program to model triangles. And so I was trying to find exactly what they were trying to communicate through this golden ratio triangular craft, because clearly there seemed to be more to it than that. And so I ended up modeling this craft based on the measurements I had and some of the angles that I had found that were very close to 432, for instance, and so on. And I plugged that in. And so to create it, I assigned this side here that we see here. I assigned this length, this relative length, as being 144, because I know, right, this harmonic is very critical. So I arbitrarily assigned essentially this length to be 144, plug the angles that I noticed, and essentially by playing with it a little bit, I figured out what they were trying to communicate for this manifestation. And what came out was absolutely mind-blowing to me. And let me walk you through it here, exactly what that is. So this shape precisely and these angles, so not only, as I said, not only by dividing any side of this triangle by any other sides, we get the golden ratio, but even the angles, if you look at this angle A to the left side here, this angle is, you know, once again, the triangle is perfected, if you will. This angle is 4.32 degrees. Again, this is related to this harmonic 432, right?
Yeah.
The other angle here we see on the right side is 6.944 degree, which is exactly the reciprocal of 144.
Wow.
This is the inverse of the harmonic 144. And let me just pull out my calculator machine here so I can show some of it, right? You see here, if I take 1 divided by 144, oops, let me close this. 1 divided by 144, we get 6.94. You see, 6.9944. So this is exactly that angle that we see here.
Yeah.
And if we look at this other angle here, this other angle was positing me this 168 degrees, 168.736. But I figured out a day later that, you know, again, the sum of the angle in a triangle always adds up to 180 degrees. So if we just subtract that from that angle and we divide by this 432, we get the golden ratio squared again.
Wow.
And again, and now by assigning this side A as being this harmonic 144, automatically with these angles, this other side B here has to be 144 divided by the golden ratio. And finally, the side C relatively is equivalent to the harmonic 144 times golden ratio. So everything about this triangle that we see here, and this little table to the left here shows essentially all these relationships that we just described, and the percent match with, you know, accuracy in terms of the being perfectly right on the dot. It was quite stunning to me. Even the height also, if you look this little height of this triangle here, is 432 divided by 4, and the semi-perimeter, if you calculate it, it also adds up to this harmonic 144 times golden ratio. Now,
Wow.
you may recall in the last update what we went through, right? When I presented this work about the Earth grid and how the Earth grid itself, the lattice of the Earth grid, based on all the location of these ancient sacred sites, the location based on this calculation was suggesting that the Earth grid lattice were based on this harmonic 144 times golden ratio here.
Mm-hmm.
And this wasn't.
Jimmy, let me jump in real quick. Grant, this is when I was in Wisconsin a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
That location there lines up with this Earth grid.
Yeah.
And Jimmy broadcasted for us. But of course, in true form, when you get together and it's been hours of getting together, when does our transmission come through? Which it was an hour after Jimmy had sent it, but it was right when we were packing up our gear, throwing it all back in the car. The camera was down and then the radio started going. So yeah. So
that was what happened. Can
yeah.
you explain exactly what happened? Was it just the radios? Because that's what happened in Illinois when
we had our
did it, and I
camera.
started filming it with my cell phone.
And see, we were probably north of where you were in Illinois into Wisconsin, which is, the grid area. And yeah, we had our cameras set up, and often you can't see these with your bare eye, but we had our night vision gear up, which it of course came down. And yeah, we had lots of interesting activity that night before the transmission and after, but I was pretty sure something coincided when the radios started all squawking. And yeah, but we don't know because we missed it, but that's to be continued. There'll be a part 2.
Yeah, we had the sighting also during the transmission. I shared with the group also, right? During the transmission, there's it looks like, one of these, shooting star, if you will, but during the transmission itself, this, what looks like a so-called shooting star went through, right? Right during the transmission.
Oh, we even had the International Space Station fly through, like the example of what we're not saying. It was one of those moments, and it was impressive, but to say the least, there was the other fun stuff too. But Jimmy, you do this stuff all the time for groups. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like, it's dismissive, but I mean, you do have activity from your friends that you do this for, and you do send messages, and we can talk about the types of messages you send later if you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll cover that. With pleasure.
Perfect. We do have an audience now, so they're starting to creep in.
The activity may have been the radios, though. You're looking for something in the sky, and it may have been the activity of the radio, and it may be this trickster phenomena that it happens just as you're unpacking stuff. Because that's what they want. The old story that usually UFOs show up when people don't have their cameras, or
I put it
these stories where people like the girl from the Rolling Stones, where her husband, the guy from the Rolling Stones, where she said they were on the beach in Brazil, and then the thing started, and he said, "I got to go back and get my glasses," and he went running back to the house, and that's when it happened. So he missed the whole thing. And it's almost like the trickster phenomenon.
We had overlays of that too. I had walkie-talkies and other people had walkie-talkies. I, of course, charged all my gear before we tromped out there. Who gets out there and has dead walkie-talkies? Girl, so, there was those elements at play. And it wasn't till I got home, I think 2 days later, and after talking with Jimmy, and then with that group again, that I realized that with the time zone difference, when he had transmitted and we had received, because he sent a very specific message for us with our location. So an hour later.
And the other thing that we had that we didn't, when I was sitting there, I said, oh, it's another one of these CE5 things where nothing happens. And we walked away believing that nothing had happened except the radio's going off. And then when people started, one person said they showed that photograph with me and this thing in between me and Sinead. And then we started asking people for photographs, and there was photographs. There's all sorts of stuff that I didn't see any of it, but it was being picked up by cameras all over the place.
Yeah, often it's the post analysis, and we realize after the facts, all these things that happens. Often it's common. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So this is and so let me get back to that slide here. So if you recall, what we went through last time was these essentially the Earth grid and all these locations were tied to these Earth grid lattice, harmonic 144 and harmonic 44 times golden ratio. And once expressed in terms of kilometer, this is equivalent exactly to 432 kilometers. So these are, again, all these same numbers that come back over and over again. And again, I had been broadcasting this message on these two frequencies, right? 144.1 and 432. What we saw also is, if we get back to this triangular craft, these numbers we see related to these harmonics, are completely tied again to, the biology, DNA, and how our body operates. If you look at it, right, we presented that in the last update too, but I think it's good to show it again. If we look just like how the cells divide, for instance, right, if we represent that in terms of sacred geometry here, right, we see these two cells, and if we take the length of this green segment here, we divide it by the length of this red segment, it's exactly the golden ratio proportion.
Wow.
If we divide this length, the total length of this green and red segment combined divided by the blue segment, we get the golden ratio proportion again.
Yeah.
And what we find is that if we take a cross section for DNA, this is how it looks like. This was a famous picture released a few years ago. We realized that the DNA cross section is essentially, if you look at the center, it's a decagon with 10 sides and surrounded by 10 pentagons.
Wow.
And the decagon inside, every inner angle is exactly 144 degrees. And every angle of the pentagons is 108 degrees. And 108 is a very important harmonic. If you look at the bottom here, right, you take 108 times 2, you get 216 times 2, you get 432 again. And finally, the proportion itself of these pentagons is well known, like the pentagram, for instance. It's golden ratio proportion based as well, right? Take this length A here, the green length A, you divide it by length B, you get the golden ratio. So these harmonics, 144, 432, and golden ratio are embedded everywhere. And we see it like very, example of it. And one word, regarding this triangular craft also, it is possible, and obviously speculating here, but it is possible that this is actually a technology. Yeah. This graph is not proportioned that way by accident. The fact that these shapes are essentially resonating with these fundamental harmonics of light and golden ratio may give it, the ability to essentially to connect to the singularity and essentially travel instantly from one point to another in our holographic universe, just by the fact that this shape is in perfect harmony with the building blocks of the universe, literally, and the holographic universe we're in.
Quick question for you. Could it be that this is not a triangle craft and that they're just flashing the lights to give you the triangle shape and give you the hint as to what this is?
Absolutely possible. Absolutely possible. Yep.
Because it seems like you said, like this may be a key to how the universe is put together, and they're trying to get it through our heads. This is it. Take a look. This is how it works. But they're not telling you directly. They're allowing someone like you to go out there and figure it out, that this is a key to how the universe actually operates.
No, absolutely. And, I call it a craft because, for a lack of a better word, how could we prove anything, right? I could call it lights, but somebody could say, well, maybe it's a craft, right? So I'm using the craft, but you're totally right. This can be just these light flashing.
This ties into the conversation I was telling you guys about that sphere within the cube craft and what that could represent. Mm-hmm. Is that a form of communication? Like flashing these lights, is that a form of communication through mathematics? And for maybe some pop culture enthusiasts or, people in the community, this is what they were doing in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. When they were playing the music and they're flashing the tones and they're trying to get like a response back. That's a similar thing that we're sort of discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you will see in the next few slides, and that's going to be the core of this presentation. Really, that's what transpires out of it.